Welcome. In this video I'm going to be replacing the plumbing in my 2021 KZ Escape E17 hatch. Now, I've done a number of videos on this camper and I'll put a link below to my playlist where you can find those. So I'm not going to cover every single aspect of this in detail, and I'm not a professional, so do your own research on this. I'm just sharing my experience. So the reason I'm replacing this plumbing is that this is a vinyl flex tubing, and oftentimes it's put into PEX fittings with PEX crimp connectors, and that is not the proper way to connect this piping. So I'm not 100% sure these are PEX fittings, I'm just assuming they are. So I need to take all of this apart. So I am going to jump around here. I'm not going to film every second, but I'll cut in every once in a while to get progress and share the findings of what I'm finding here. Now, in a previous video I put a different water pump in here and I put a quick connect on it. So I can disconnect that, so I can get that out of the way, at least a little bit maybe. And I'm guessing most people watching this will know this already, but I'm under the bed at the front of the camper. And what I'm doing here may be similar for other campers from KZ and other brands. So before I tear into this, I kind of want to go over what I'm dealing with here. One thing I want to change is the bypass for the water heater has the valves on the bottom, and I'd really like them on the top. I don't know if you can see here, but this bottom one has a piece of wood in the way, and I could cut the wood out of the way, but it's hard to turn. It's hard to turn because it's upside down and it's running up into a piece of wood. It's like someone installed it and never tried to use it. So I should be able to take that off and flip it around. Now when I do that, the fittings will be on the opposite side, so I'll have to take that into account. Then, the way this is plumbed, water comes in from two places. It comes in from city water and from the water tank. So those pipes are here. So this one is from the tank, and this one is from the city water. So the tank comes in here to the inlet on the pump. Then we also have this here, which is just a tube. And this is what you can use for winterizing. So you could stick this in a gallon of antifreeze and it will suck it up through the pump. So these both have shutoff valves on them. They're both currently off. This one is almost always off unless you're winterizing. This one is on when you're using the pump, otherwise it's off. So the cold water comes in here. The outlet is here, and it has all this loop around, but that feeds into the cold water supply. So here we have the water from the pump and the water from the city both go into this supply. Now it's breaking off here to go into the water heater. So that goes through the bypass when the bypass is on, and then when you have the water heater on, it goes into the water heater here and comes out here. And then the hot water comes out the top and goes out the hot water PEX. So it does transition to PEX here, but there's a lot of this flex line in here. The hot water is pretty simple. You just have the hot water going from the top here into the red pipe. The cold is really where all the complication is. So I'm going to get started by cutting some of these fittings off. Maybe I'll film one so you can see what it looks like. And actually I forgot, I'm going to take a picture of this so I can reference back to it later if I get confused. Okay, that seemed to work. So I took my pliers and put it between the two layers of the strap and squeeze, and I was able to pop it open. Let's see if I can get it off all the way now. Oh, there I got it off and it was kind of covered. So this is a little tricky because I'm in tight quarters and I have a camera in front of my face. So I don't know if that's going to come off all the way. So I'll take this utility knife and I'll just kind of score this. And that's not coming off easily, so I'll just actually cut the tubing. I'm going to cut it back a bit because I do want to have something to pull on so I can remove the fitting. So I finally got that off, and that is a PEX fitting. You can tell it's a PEX fitting because of these rings around the fitting. Now if this had barbs on it, that would be indicated that it's the correct fitting. And in that case, you'd want to put a hose clamp around it. So I'm going to remove the rest of these fittings. I'm probably going to try and find some other tool to take these off with, and then I'll give an update. So in that clip I just shot, I had the panel in here and I was leaning over it and I removed it because I have a lot of work to do here and it was just going to be in the way. It was easier to remove it. So you just remove the screws and it pops right out. And that's right here. Okay, so I have most of this ripped out of here. I do have the water tank and the city water supply lines here still connected up in the back. Those might be a little tricky to remove. Actually, I think the water tank one will unscrew, but I think there's a PEX fitting on the water line. So I did get the bypass valve off and I have swapped it around. I still need to tighten it down. These are the fittings I was left over with. I have 3 T's, a union, an elbow, and 2 valves. I don't know why there was a union in there. Seems strange to me. Like, I would think they would have just used a longer pipe, but so I don't know if I'm going to reuse these fittings. They're probably fine, but they're pretty cheap. I may get new ones. These valves seem okay. I don't know what the quality level is of them. I could get some new valves that are brand name and good quality, and I could even get like the lever type valves that are high quality, but we'll see. I'm not sure yet. And here's some of the scrap left over. These are the clamps and the hoses, and I have some scrap hose there. I'll keep that for now in case I need to use it for anything. So now I need to stare at this and figure out how I'm going to route all of these pipes. One that's pretty straightforward is this hot water pipe. I need to connect it up here, so I may just put an elbow here and here up into the PEX. Now this water pump can easily be moved to whatever position would be more convenient. So if this isn't ideal, I can swap that around. So I'm going to continue working on this, and I'll cut in when I have something to update you with. To get the city water connection loose back here, I just removed the 3 screws here, and this came out. So now I can have easier access to this, and I don't have to crawl back there. Okay, so I think I have a plan here. Now I took the water pump and I turned it around. So the inlet used to be on this side, and the outflow was on the other side. And then this had the angled fitting, and that had the straight fitting, and I swapped those around. So I'm going to plumb a piece of PEX from this line to the tank. And in that, I will have the valve here, and then I'll probably put a T on there to tee off for the line for winterization. The cold will come out here, and that will connect up to this with the T, and I will tee off this to go to the cold here, and then this will continue here, and this will go to the city water connection. So everything here is PEX, except I will want a flex hose for winterization. So what I'll probably do is take the vinyl, and I'll take one of the quarter turn valves and I'll put a hose clamp on here because this shouldn't be under pressure. This is under suction. So this will be in the supply. This will have PEX on this end, and I'll stick this tube in the RV antifreeze. So I really shouldn't have any leaks there. And if I did, it would be tiny leaks while I'm using it. But again, when it's under suction, it's not like there's going to be pressure there. I could get some fittings here to do a proper connection, but I just don't think that's necessary for this specific connection. So for the hot water, I'll put an elbow here and run into here. So that will be pretty simple. So I need to get some more parts gathered, and I'll break in as I have different stages done, or if I need to make any changes or updates. Okay, so I got some supplies to do the plumbing here. I've got 2 10-foot pieces of PEX. I have 1 red, 1 blue. I actually have some PEX, but it's in a coil, and I wanted straight PEX, so I just bought some 10-foot pieces. And I bought 6 foot of foam rubber insulation. So this is the really dense insulation. It's adhesive also. So I'll probably put this around some of the pipe just to cut down on noise. You could also put this on to cut down on condensation, like if you're camping in the middle of summer and you have that cold water coming in from the hydrant. The pipes can sweat. It probably wouldn't cause a lot of damage, but that's another reason you might want to insulate. Then I have these things here. I have a PEX crimper cutter. This is a go, no-go gauge. So this determines that your crimps are good. I have some PEX crimp rings. These are the copper rings. So the fittings before use the steel bands, the clamp style, and my crimpers for the copper rings. Then I have some T-fittings, some elbow fittings. And this is an elbow fitting that's threaded that may fit on the water pump. So I had the elbow on the one side. I may put an elbow on the other side. I'm not completely sure yet. So the key to plumbing with PEX, or plumbing in general, is order of operations. So I need to have some elbows back here, and it wouldn't make sense for me to do the connections up here, then do the elbows back there. You want to pre-assemble things as much as you can. So I can crimp all that out in the open and then put it back there, and then I have to crimp it here and then on the tank. I don't have to be hanging out back there trying to do crimps in a cramped spot. Also, the tank line is low. The city line is a little bit higher, so I'd want to do the tank line first, so I don't have to work around the city line. So as you're working through this, you want to take all these things into consideration to make things go smoothly. So I'm going to measure everything out, and I'll film at least doing 1 crimp so you can see how I do it. Okay, so I cut this here, and I had bought a red pipe, but I'm not sure I'm going to need it. I may have enough here. So I want to put an elbow here, but it will make sense to crimp this first before I install it here. Now I'll probably crimp this up here later, but then I'll just have 1 crimp down here. So I'll take the copper ring and put it on here. And you can see how the fitting fits in here. We want that copper ring to be somewhere around like that. So what's that, maybe 3/16 of an inch? You want it to be around the center here. It doesn't have to be perfect, but probably about like that. Now another thing to consider, if I crimped this on first like this, it may not be straight up and down. So by crimping this on, this pipe, when I put it in here, I can adjust this back and forth before I crimp this down. So I'm actually going to line the crimper up here with the crimp ring, and I'll put this in, and this does not matter which orientation this is in for this crimp, and I'll crimp it down. There we go. So you can see that's crimped. I'll open it up, Now to open these all the way, you really need to open the handles up quite a ways. So like if I let that pipe slip out, let's see, that's about how much clearance I need. So you can see how much the handles are opened up to allow the pipe out sideways. So as you're crimping, keep that in mind. You'll need a lot of clearance to open and close these if you're using this style of crimper. So now I'll need to put a crimp ring on here, and I'll put the pipe in here. And I think I'll get this all cut and fit before I do any more crimping. So I guess I can film that. And I forgot, I do need to check this with my go, no-go gauge here. So this is 1/2 inch go, no go. So I'll put this here. This fits around. If I go to the other side, it does not fit. So that tells you got a good crimp. So I put a little bend in this pipe and I'll stick it in here. So I want to cut it so the bottom of this is lined up about with the bottom of this, so I can put this in. So I'm thinking right about where my thumb is. So I'll get out my PEX cutter. I'll carefully cut. Okay, so now I'll put rings on this short piece, and I may be able to use this as is. Maybe not. I think I'll cut that a little bit. So I'll kind of put that where it kind of naturally goes, right about there. So I'm probably going to cut just about a 1/2 inch off of that. It can be hard to make shortcuts with this cutter, but try that. I think that'll be pretty good. Now I'm going to get all of this crimped. I really don't need to crimp this bottom one here until the others are crimped. So I'll start by crimping the ones that have the least degrees of motion, which would be like this one here, and I'll work my way over. So these here can be kind of tricky. It's going to want to slide down. So I'll get it in the crimp tool and I'll give it just a little bit of tension, but not enough to crimp it, so I can move it in place to do the final crimping. Now I'll do my final crimp down here. So this is going to be a little tricky. I'll have to pull the cold water pipe out of the way so I have access. So hot water PEX is done. So now I'm going to work on the cold water side. I'm not going to film all that, but I'll come back when I'm done or if I have anything to show. Okay, so I pre-assembled this to get this square. I set it on the flat surface. This will go into the freshwater tank, and then I put a valve here. I have a short piece of PEX here and here with the T. So this allows me to shut off the freshwater tank, and this is the inlet for the antifreeze. So I just used a hose clamp with vinyl tubing on this one, and this is the one I was talking about that has suction on it, so that shouldn't be an issue. And then I will have a piece of PEX to go from here to the water pump. So that will go in right about there. But as you can see, if I were to have to go back there and crimp all this, that'd be really difficult. So making this ahead of time, and I'll actually even be able to crimp on a piece of tubing here, and then I'll just have the final crimp to make. And I could actually unscrew this, although I may leave that in place to make sure it's lined up properly. So once I have this in place, the water tank plumbing will be finished on the inlet side, and then I just have the output to do. So I pulled this back out again to crimp this part on. Okay, so I have the supply hooked up here. So I need to have that go into the camper supply, but I also have to connect it up to the pump and to the heater. So this is going to get a little tricky here. It's a little tight. Almost wish I had put this further down. Thought about moving it, but I think I'll probably keep it. I could have the cold water come back here and over. So I need to sort through some of that, but otherwise I'm getting close to finishing up. Now I do want to mention I bought a 25 pack of PEX rings, and I'm down to 3, and I still have quite a few fittings to go, but I did have some already, but it definitely took more than 25. Okay, so I have everything put back together. So I did end up cutting a little bit off of this red pipe and moving this over, give me clearance here. I was kind of a tight fit in there, but I think that's going to work. So of my 10-foot piece of PEX, I have about that much left, and I didn't even use the red one, so I can return it. But I have this pipe here coming from the tank going into the pump. We have the winterization tube, and we have shutoffs on both of those, and those go into the cold water supply on the camper. We also have a line from the city water to the cold water supply. That branches off into the water heater, into the bypass hose. So right now this is in bypass mode, so it will go from cold to hot. If we turn both of these this way, it will go through the water heater. And those go into the cold and hot water supply lines. So I feel like I removed some hose here. I don't know if this is longer or shorter than what I had before. Certainly the flex tube could go around corners easier, so I had to create a little U in the back there and some elbows to get the pipes through here, whereas with the flex tube, you would just curve the tube. I do think this is a lot cleaner to look at. It looks a little more organized. One thing I can think of that's a potential disadvantage is it might transmit noise through the water pump into some of these pipes. So I'll just have to test that out and see. Now I did get that insulation, but I am going to pressurize this and leave it for a while before I insulate. I don't want to put insulation over any of the joints because I do want to check if they'll leak. Although I can't remember having a PEX joint ever leak that I crimped properly and checked with the go no-go gauge. And I did check all of these connections. So time will tell if this worked well. If I have any issues, I'll probably make an update video and put an update in the comments. But that's all I'm going to cover in this video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. If you like this video, please click like. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I'd appreciate if you could do that. And thanks for watching. Until next time, goodbye.